Whether you found your way to this lecture because you need to augment some of the lecture material which you're receiving in your respective statistics course, or maybe you're interested in research study design, just generally speaking, or maybe you're doing research on your own, I appreciate you being here. Now, as it pertains to this particular lecture, some of the topics which we cover are going to be more useful and pragmatic than others, but we need to get through it all. So thanks for being here. And without further ado, let's get started. So research and study design. First, we'll discuss randomized design. Now, the textbook definition for randomized design is in a completely randomized design, objects or subjects are assigned to groups completely at random. For a controlled experiment, which I'm sure many of you may be at least somewhat familiar with, this allows the researcher to control for threats to internal and external validity of the study. Threats to internal validity compromise the researcher's ability to say whether a relationship exists between the independent and dependent variables. So in this case, we have some sort of applied methodology as applied to one group within an experiment, and the other does not have any sort of application. So as it relates to Group A was given some sort of drug. Group B did not get the drug. Group A listened to music. Group B did not listen to music. Group A went to the gym. Group B did not go to the gym. Group A smoked, and Group B did not smoke. So in each instance for Group A, the experimental group, there was some sort of application of something. In this case, it was a drug. In this case, it was listening to music. In this case, it was going to the gym. In this case, it was smoking. For the control group, and again, each of these groups corresponds with the other. For the control group in each instance, whether it was a study on drugs or a study on music or a study on going to the gym, in the control group, the individuals from which that particular group was comprised did not receive whatever the application was as it pertains to Group A. So they did not smoked. They did not go to the gym, went to the gym. So each one of these groups is a group within a particular experiment. One is receiving some sort of application, the other is not. This is the group, this is the control group, and this is the controlled experiment, whether it be an experiment as it relates to drugs, music, gym activities, or smoking. Next, we have a blind test method. So a blind test is an experimentation in which the participants are blind or unaware as to whether or not they are in the experimental or control group. So the way to think of this is with a placebo trial. So an individual receiving a placebo or a drug, they would not be sure as to which group they're in. So if one individual is given a sugar pill and the other is given the actual treatment and it's a drug treatment experiment, the outcome could be analyzed and we wouldn't be concerned with whether or not the individual having knowledge as to which group they're in. We wouldn't be concerned with that knowledge impacting the experimental outcome because they could be in either they could either be in the control group or the other group. The individual is unaware. So blind testing is experimentation on participants who are unaware as to whether they're in the experimental or the control group. Observational studies are research studies in which researchers collect information from participants or look at data that was already collected. So in observational studies, researchers will follow groups of people over a period of time. Right? This group of people is a sample from which we're trying to make an inference as it pertains to the entire population. But in any case, for this particular sample, researchers are following them for a period of time. Depending on the study, the groups may include healthy people, people who have cancer, these are just examples, or people who are at high risk of developing cancer, such as those with a familial history. In an observational study, we measure or survey members of a sample without trying to affect them. So again, we might have a group of individuals from a particular area, say where cancer is prevalent, and this particular group of individuals, we we've screened them, we've collected information as it pertains to their behaviors. Maybe we've taken genetic information, that sort of thing. And we're going to be tracking these individuals over a period of time and perhaps giving them subsequent screenings. However, it's important that we're not trying to affect their behavior as it relates to our study. So maybe if it's not something health related, or maybe it doesn't involve health screenings, maybe each particular year that we're studying these individuals for a certain pre-selected period of time, we're giving them some sort of written survey and we're asking them to fill out various prompts. Maybe there's 20 prompts. And of these 20 prompts, maybe only 5 of these particular prompts we're interested in, but we mix them in with another 15 prompts because we don't want them to be in any way changing their behavior or affecting them uh, in a way which would impact the outcome of the study. Now, a comparative experiment involves testing 2 variables within the experimental design. It can contain a testing hypothesis, at least one manipulated variable, and one dependent responding variable and a control group. So in this case, for our comparative experiment, we have group A and group B. So group A is trying product A, group B is trying product B. That's one particular experiment. For a different experiment, a different comparative experiment, group A is listening to music genre A, group B is listening to music genre B. And we want to test for something as it pertains to the application of each particular scenario. So with the control experiment, we have an application and then lack of an application. For a comparative experiment, we have application A versus application B. And that should be for group B, attended school B, not attended school B. But in any case, the question often arises, are all controlled experiments comparative experiments? And all controlled experiments are indeed comparative experiments because we're comparing something, but in that instance, we have a control group. However, not all comparative experiments are controlled experiments. All right, for comparative experiments, we can have an A versus B as far as product testing or genre or some sort of comparative analysis as it pertains to scenario. For a controlled experiment, we have an instance where there's an application and then non-application, hence the control. So again, all controlled experiments are comparative experiments, but not all comparative experiments are control experiments because not all comparative experiments possess a control group. All right? Primary data is data that has been generated by the researcher himself or herself through surveys, interviews, experiments, or which were specifically designed for understanding and solving the research problem at hand. So this is data which you collected, your organization collected, individuals who work for you collected in your laboratory or whatever. That is primary data. Some individuals get confused and think, okay, well, if I sent my people out to collect the data, that is secondary data. No, that's data. Since it was your people who went out and collected your data, that is primary data. If it's data which was collected within your organization that you then accessed, that is still primary data. That differs from secondary data in that secondary data is data that was collected by someone other than the primary user. So this is data, in many instances, the example that I utilize, which is most easily understood, this is data that was collected by another organization, which then you or your group then accessed and utilized for your experimental purposes, okay? So primary data, you're collecting it or your organization is collecting it at your behalf. Secondary data, it was collected by someone else, some other organization, and then you're then accessing it for your needs. Voluntary sampling occurs when researchers seek volunteers to participate in studies. So if you are out and about and you happen to see flyers up which say, so and so is conducting such and such a study. Are you an individual between this age and that age? And then, maybe you suffer from some particular affliction. Give this number a call. We're conducting a study as it relates to XYZ. That is voluntary sampling. You're soliciting individuals to contact you based on some primary pre-selected categorical information which you've provided. This differs from convenience sampling. Convenience sampling you can think of as the individuals out with clipboards. They're just trying to sample based on convenience. They're out and about, you're out and about, and anyone who will stop that they can speak with, that is from whom they're collecting their data from. So this can be due to geographical proximity, availability at a given time. Maybe it's a phone bank that's doing the convenience sampling. They're just calling different individual residences and they'll seeing who's picking up, and then they're collecting data. So pretty much anyone that will speak to these individuals at a particular given time, that is convenience sampling. Then, from that sample data, there can be other methodologies which are put in place to further sift through it to see what's useful, and that which can be utilized as it pertains to the experiment. But voluntary sampling, you're asking for volunteers. You're asking them based on it as it pertains to a particular restriction, categorical restriction that you've put in place. And then, you're sifting through those volunteers, making sure they do indeed adhere to whatever the categorical guidelines are and conducting your experiment. For convenience sampling, you're just out and about, shotgun approach, calling, stopping individuals in the street, and trying to solicit them for information as it relates to whatever your experiment may be. So that is it for this particular topic. I hope that you were able to learn something from all that we had discussed today. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.